Hello everybody, this is TipTop MTG here today with another Magic the Gathering video. In today's video, I'm doing something a little different. I am taking every legendary creature from Standard and the ones that were added to Brawl and giving you my rankings of every single legendary Brawl creature commander. So in this video, I'm going to be basically giving every single legendary creature in Standard right now a letter between F and S, and that will determine basically what I think of them as a Brawl commander. This does not mean what I think of them inside of the 59. This does not mean the card is bad. I'm just looking at it from a Brawl perspective. Also, this does not include any Planeswalkers. Those will be a completely separate list. So if you guys want to see that, stay tuned. But just a couple things to note. This is not 100% based on power. A deck that wins can be fun, but a deck that also isn't the best at winning can also be fun. Now, if a deck doesn't, like if a commander is really awesome, but there's no support for it in Standard, it's going to get a lower rating though, even though, this list isn't based on power. Power still applies because, if it's not fun to just always lose, or it's not fun to not be able to build your deck because there's just not enough cards. So yeah, just keep that in mind. So let's start with the F. So I'm kind of just going to scroll through these and just, there's a lot of legendary creatures, so I'm not going to be able to talk about all of them really in depth, but, we have things like Aphamia, who, this one is just a mono-colored commander. You'll notice a lot of the cards here are just mono-colored cards that are either legendary due to their mechanics, due to the lore, kind of like the demigods, so they kind of have to be legendary, or they're just legendary as a balancing act. A good example of that is Questing Beast, which you really wouldn't want to run as a commander. It's just a good card in your deck, and it's legendary in order for balance to have, in order for it to not be too busted of a card, even though it is pretty broken. So, all of these cards are not that great to build around. For instance, Dracuset's a different example. It's a very cool creature, and it could be something you build around, but it's better in the 59 because you're more likely to want to be able to cheat this out using something like, Blood for Bones and throwing this in a multicolored deck. So, a lot of these cards are bad because they are single colored, or they just don't do enough, or like Lavinia only hoses a couple strategies, and if you're not playing against those strategies, now your commander is kind of useless. So you have to keep that in mind. Then we have someone like Tomek, who again only hoses certain strategies. And then Giganta and Yumori and all of the, not all of the companions, a decent amount of the companions. Lutri is actually banned. So, yeah, but they are in here because, well, they're probably better off to be done as a companion, not as the commander, because most of these, if you're building a commander around the similar theme, you're going to be able to fit these in pretty well into the deck. Otherwise, they wouldn't be good commanders anyway, so they're better to be companions. Now, not every companion is here. And then our last one here is Adaro, which is a really weird card, which you need to cycle in order for the whole mechanic of the card to work, and you can't actually cycle from the command zone. So that actually concludes all my F tier. So to go back through them, we have basically just doesn't work in the command zone. We have a bunch of companions. We have hosing strategies. We have wanting to cheat it out of graveyards, balancing, doesn't do enough to constitute its own deck, and is monocolored. And those are pretty much the reasons that something would be an F. So moving on to the Ds. These are the ones that I could see people trying to make an argument for, but maybe they're not the most fun to play. Think about these as a willing to play-ness. So Rakdos, for instance. No, it could be interesting as part of your 59 other cards. It actually might be 60 other cards. I don't remember. It's either way. You would rather run him in the middle of a maybe Rakdos sacrifice deck rather than as the commander. There are better cards such as Judith, which we will get to eventually, that are better for that. Ratana Renata is actually different than all the other demigods, and I could actually see an argument for playing this card. First off, it's power-based when it comes to devotion, which the red one is too, but this one, green is going to put out a lot of big creatures, which means a lot of devotion. On top of that, the fact that everything enters with an additional +1/+1 counter is a major effect compared to something like Daxos or any of the other demigods. So I think that's why this one can, rate a little bit above the other ones, even if it is monocolored still. And I'm not saying monocolored is always bad, it's just generally that shows that, oh, you don't get as much selection to cards. We also have Villus, who is very similar to Drakuseth, where you would rather cheat this guy out, but this guy also does have a little bit more clear of a build around, so that's why he's ranked a little bit above. But then we have like Rankle, who you'd rather have in your main deck, which, you know, these are like okay commanders, but you'd rather just have them in your main deck. Zerda is a companion here that isn't actually in F tier because, well, the same doesn't apply. Like, he could be your commander, and his companion ability, it could still be really hard to get to. So, but I still think he's pretty low because I'd rather just run him in the deck, like a Kenrith deck might like to run him. Then we have all the Sir cards. They're all pretty just meh, and they're all monocolored, so they're not that great to just play. So then we have like Tajik, who just isn't a very good Boros commander. What are you doing? You're playing a 3-2. Well, you can mentor things, and it has haste, but like, you know, you're preventing all non-combat damage, which is kind of cool. And then you can pay to give him first strike. It just doesn't seem powerful enough to be your commander or a strong enough build around. And then like Zagana, okay, you're doing +1/+1 counters. Honestly, just not a great. Even just as a commander for +1/+1 counters, I would rather play something that, you know, puts +1/+1 counters. And this is just kind of boring. Like, I'm not saying this isn't powerful, and it's not that powerful, but it's also just kind of boring. And then we have like Gatwick, the Wizened, who is again monocolored, and he's just going to do something big when he enters the battlefield. And then, yeah, I mean, you're playing blue, so you can probably bounce him back to hand, but it's just not that great. So, yeah. And then we have like Adamus, the All-Seeing, who again is another mono blue commander, which could be cool in the 99, or not the 99, in the main deck, but like with as the commander, not that great. We have like Arasta of the Endless Web, who doesn't do much against opponents who don't play instant sorceries. We have Mowu, who's a counter deck, but only has half the colors of a counter deck. So a lot of these are down here because they're just not the right colors. Like Atreus is down here though, because like, okay, this is a cool card, but is it really commander worthy? Now I could see, okay, I want to play a Persistent Petitioner deck. This is probably the best commander for it because it's an advisor itself and it fits blue and black, which allows you to squeeze black into your Persistent Petitioner's deck. So like, I could see an argument for this, but it generally just isn't that great. Gali of the Endless Dance doesn't have enough support. Linden the Steadfast Queen, you'd much rather play something like Heliod for the same mana cost. Like, this is great in the deck, but not as the lead of the deck, because what are you doing? Oh, you're gaining life. What are you going to do with that life? Nothing. I mean, you can do stuff with it, but it's better to have consistent ways to use the life, because there's a lot more life gain than there is ways to use life. Then we have, like, Yorvo, and then we have Yorvo, because there are just better commanders. You'd be better off just using like Nissa and then ramping into Yorvo. Not ramping, you'd already have the mana for that. But the point is that you're generating lots more mana. We have Tirana Cub, because this card just always bothered me. It's like, okay, you're swinging with her and giving something indestructible, but if you need to give something indestructible, and she is a 3/3, then that means that thing had to be either a 2/2 or 1/1. And it really didn't need to, you know, get boosted up. Like, this card just is kind of weird, and it's mono white, which isn't great for Brawl. We have God Eternal Bontu, who just does a big thing when it enters the battlefield, and it's not that great. And then we have Alconarus, who just hoses a specific theme, and then if you're not playing against that theme, it's just kind of a dead card, so you probably don't want that as at least your commander. You might run it in your main deck, because it has Vigilance, Menace, and Lifelink, but from a commander perspective, it's kind of a little bit, like, it's just not great. And then Massacre Girl, again, good in your deck, but just, it's kind of meant to be a surprise that you have a board wipe. Your opponent knowing that, oh, they can just board wipe next turn and kill all my 1/1s, that's not that useful. It's not as useful. It is useful, but and then again, you're limiting yourself to one color. Story of Devkar and Lich. This one just requires that Storov get through to deal combat damage, and so if the game ever comes to a stall, you're just kind of stuck there doing nothing, while your opponent is probably doing something, so not a big fan. And let's move into the C tier. So you'll notice, like, the first ones were kind of just, oh, monocolored, and then these ones are kind of just like, oh, they're good cards, but they're just better in the main deck. Now here's where we're going to start to get to some of the cooler commanders. For instance, God Eternal Ronis. This one, I could see an argument for putting it down a tier, but I think it's a much better enter the battlefield ability than Bontu. Bontu, you could play Bontu in a board where you're like, I actually don't want to sacrifice anything, versus Ronis will always almost give you a little benefit, plus it has Death Touch to do with lots of threats. So I feel like this is a lot better. Also, all the God Eternals will come back, so they're very cool. Oketra, I like the fact that it's a very clear build around. I want to cast lots of little creatures, which white likes to do, and that's going to allow me to make even more creatures so that I can swing and go wide. This one is a persistent effect. That's why I think it's much better than something like Bantu, because Bantu just enters the battlefield once. God Eternal Oketra is going to stay on that battlefield, and she has double strike, so if you can boost her, she's going to deal tons of damage. So much better than Bantu. Then we have Irelia, who I think is the much better Boros commander over something like Tajik, just because it has the flying in there with the mentor, meaning that you can not almost always, but you can attack more often to then boost up your creatures. You can manipulate power to then manipulate mentor. For instance, if you have a 4/4 creature with mentor and a 4/4, you can give the thing with the 4/4 that has mentor +2 power, so it can then mentor more things. So she just overall really works well with the mentor mechanic, and she just can always pretty much attack. Like, I mean, there's like, it's very hard for her not to attack. They have to have a pretty big flying board state, because she can give herself vigilance and trample. So yeah. Then we have Atrata the Silencer. Again, this is a cool card, and I could see the argument of, oh, this is cool to have in the command zone so you can get this win con out really fast, or even just as a one-time just removal spell, because this can be just a removal spell, but it's just a little gimmicky for my liking. Yorian, the Sky Nomad, this one, the companion restriction can't actually be done in Brawl, so you can't actually have this as your Brawl companion, so that's why I kind of put it higher. It doesn't have the argument of, why don't you just use it as your companion? It also does something very cool where if you can flicker this, you can then flicker everything, which turns like Thassa decks, like you could throw like Thassa in this deck, you could throw any flicker spells, and it turns flicker target creature into flicker all your creatures, which I think is very cool. And we have, like, Cheval, Bane of Monsters, who I think would be better in a 4-player game of Brawl, for the fact that he basically says, hey, everyone kill this creature, versus in a 2-player game, you're just like, I'm going to kill that creature, and you were probably going to kill that creature anyway, so you're just getting a little bit of a bonus off of it. We have, like, Eutropia, the Twice Favored, which, whenever you play an enchantment, put a counter on something and it gains flying. Not that impressive. I mean, it is a low-costing one, so I think it does have value there, but it's just not as great as some of the other Simic commanders. We have Grum Goalie, who cares about non-humans, and they enter with an additional +1/+1 counter on it, which is nice because it's 2 colors compared to, like, the Green Demigod, but it's kind of boring. I wouldn't be like, ooh, that's exciting to build around. I would rather play that in the deck than as the commander. We have Dalikos, which I think is actually a very cool commander. I don't think there's enough support in Standard. I think in, first off, Historic and in just Commander, normal Commander, this is a much cooler card. And if we got a artifact set or an equipment set, like, of course, at 2021 was an equipment set, this could see some really serious play. We have Erebos Bleak Hearted. This one is interesting. It's a god. I think it's one of the weaker of the gods in terms of just, it doesn't just come into the board and just, I don't know. It's making you pay life to draw cards, and you already start at 25 life, so paying 2 life's a decent amount, but it does allow you to turn your creatures into removal, and it's indestructible, so it's going to be kind of hard to remove, so I think it's pretty good. Same thing with Nylia. Nylia is kind of just boring. She's pretty good, but she's boring. Naheb is a very interesting card. It is ramping in mana. It also gives you a discard outlet. And then, yeah, so I just really like Naheb. And then we have Clothis, who I think can be powerful. I just think it's kind of boring to just do something once a turn. Just, oop, once a turn, 2 damage, oop, once a turn, some mana. And then there's a chance it just does nothing. And it's only, yeah, I just think it's kind of lame. And then we have, like, Safara, who's very cool as a commander because you can dodge commander attacks. It's just, if you're playing flyers, why aren't you playing blue-white flyers? Kogelo is kind of similar to Questing Beast in the fact that there's no real central way to build around this. It's kind of just a card with Legendary, but the fact that it has Return Target Human maybe gives it some potential to synergize with Human, so that's why I put it much higher in the list. We have Snapdax, Apex of the Hunt. This one is okay. It's kind of boring. Whenever you're mutating on it, destroy something. Cool. That's powerful. It's not even destroy something. It's just deal 4 damage. That's powerful, but, like, I just want to do something more fun. Like, oh, reveal the top card of your library, put it on the battlefield. So, yeah, we have Thrix, the Sudden Storm. This is, it's a very clear build around. It is monocolored, which is why it's so low, but, I mean, I say it's so low, but at this point we're starting to get into better commanders. It's an interesting one. It's just, it's just interesting. It would have been better if this was a Simic commander. This would have been much higher on my list. We have Tristana Discordant. This one is a Selesnya kind of card, and it just doesn't do enough for its mana cost. It's not enough to build the deck around. There are much better token creators in the standard. Just so you know, these like D tiers or whatever we're looking at the time, they are not specifically in this order. Now, the very last one and the very first one may be like at opposite ends of the spectrum, but I will mention that if that's the case. It's just generally these are just all similarly, like I would play that like, you know, tier. Like I would play Tristana just as much as I would play Vadrok, because Vadrok again just lets you kind of recast non-creature spells. I'm sure there's some really fun things you can do with this, but at the time I just haven't seen anything that interesting that I would want to do with this. And so let's move into B. So these are where we're really going to start seeing the cool decks, like Pelucanos the Unchained. This allows you to dodge the commander attacks by playing for escape and just letting it go to your graveyard. You're going to get this giant 12/12, and you're kind of just going to win with combat, which can be kind of boring. You don't really have like, oh, this awesome synergy. I mean, you could throw in some maybe like green proliferate in there, but it's just overall kind of just boring, but it's powerful. We have Lurus of the Dreamdown, which I think is actually a very interesting card for the fact that it's kind of like Muldrotha, but much cheaper and, you know, converted mana cost 2 or less. Now, I think there's a real argument to say that, hey, Lurus is better as the commander, where you can have the support cards that cost 2 or more, but then that cost more than 2, but then you can also use his little synergy for converted mana cost 2 or less. So, like, I think he has a real argument to be the commander of a deck. We have Krenko, which I think is a really fun build around. Even though it is monocolored, I think that it has everything it needs in red to be successful, and it's really fun to build. We have Rolesk, which is kind of like my pick. I actually really like Rolesk. The issue with it is that when he dies, which means he can't go back to the command zone, so you kind of have to find a way to get him out of the command, out of the graveyard, but I think it's just better than, at least it's more fun than something like Zagana, where you can use this on more than just +1/+1 counter creatures. If you want to use this in a proliferate, in a command, like if you wanted a Simic Planeswalker deck, this would fit perfectly in that. So I think this is a very interesting card. We have Oriana, Angel of Rebirth, which I thought was going to be a really awesome card, but the issue is it kind of it's just a lightning rod. No one's going to kill your creatures if they know they're just going to come back to your hand. Now, this does mess with combat, which is why it's so high, but it's a lightning rod for removal, so you kind of have to give it protection somehow, which there isn't a ton of in Standard right now, unless you're just going to be counterspelling everything. There's no, like, Lightning Greaves of Standard right now. We have Lazav the Multifarious, which is a very powerful card, but it's not that fun. I mean, you get to basically play creatures you've already played before again. So yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, it's interesting in the fact that like it's predicament. It's powerful but kind of boring. We have Callias Zenith Seeker, which angels, demons, and dragons are all very fun creature types within Magic, and this just, this would probably be higher on my list. Unfortunately, it's just one big AoE, and it doesn't have blue to help it, but white can do some flickery stuff, so, it could be some interesting things you could do here. With Kethis, I think that Kethis is probably actually better than Rihanna, but it's somewhere in the same boat. It's a very clear theme that you're trying to build around, and it's just overall really fun to play. It helps you cast the spells, it helps you when your spells get killed, it helps you just kind of in all these different areas. And generally, you're going to be playing spells that are scarier than Kethis at the moment, so people are going to be trying to kill those, and Kethis can kind of skate by unscathed. We have Izani, which is a card I really like, because it creates blockers, it gives you fodder to sacrifice, and gives you benefits for sacrificing. So it's everything all in one card, and it's a late game card, but you kind of want to set up anyway, so you want to be just milling yourself and then just play her and make like 20 1/1s. So pretty cool. Kaikar, this one again gives you a very central theme. It allows you to turn your non-creature spells basically into creatures, and then allows you to turn your creatures or your non-creature spells into ramp. So you can have non-creature spells, creatures, and ramp all from non-creature spells, which is very powerful. It's also in some of the more powerful colors right now. We also have Judith, who I think is a very awesome commander. And the fact that she helps your things on the board, and then if they do die to combat because maybe you're going aggressively, you can then kill things. It is the perfect colors. It's the perfect cost. I think it's just overall really good. We have Aluna, who does very similar things where I said, oh, you know, mutate and look at the top card of your library and throw it on the battlefield. This is pretty much what that is, and it's very interesting. The unfortunate part is that, I mean, you can keep mutating onto it, but you kind of have to get lucky here, and I think it's fun. I think it's fun. That's why it's so high up on the list. I just don't know how powerful it's going to end up being. We have Nikki of the Old Ways, which I think is just a fun card that's like, hey, you play a bunch of creatures, you know, you'll be able to cast them really easily, but hey, you're not going to be able to play Control, or you're not going to be able to play some enchantments until they're dead. So I actually really like the design of this card. We have God Eternal Chapter, which I think is very fun, and the fact that it can dodge commander attacks, it allows you to copy spells, and it just lets you kind of, I don't know, it generates this value, and it is also a flyer. It's a blocker that can block pretty well, so just generally, it's pretty good. We have Amara, who's pretty good at making tokens. There's lots of fun ways you can find a tapper down to create tokens and then use those tokens to do something, so fun there. We have General Kogelo of Drannit, which is definitely a human commander, and it's definitely interesting to see how you can turn humans into killing, and you know, it's just an interesting card. A lot of these are just interesting. Brokos can kind of dodge commander attacks and come back, but he doesn't have that interesting of an ability. Other than that, we have Haktos, which is very interesting in the fact that you can kind of just, if you get lucky enough, just kind of win the game. Just swing, swing, swing. Now, I think this might be better as part of the deck in some decks, but I think if you build your deck right, this could be utterly devastating. We also have the Haunt of Hightower, which is kind of a personal pick. This is one of my favorite cards. It just incentivizes you to either mill your opponents or like kill lots of things, which is really fun. And then you get to just gain a bunch of life and deal damage. So very simple strategy, but very fun. That's kind of the theme of this group, is very fun. Now, Iara does everything black wants to do. First off, it increases black devotion. It drains your opponent. You gain life. You can sacrifice creatures, and you can draw cards. And so this is just the amalgamation of the perfect black creature. So I think if you're running mono black, this is probably one of your best choices for a commander. We have Sir Gwen, Hero of Ashvale, which I think is a very fun card in the fact that it clearly tells you, hey, you're playing equipment knights, which some people might say is a bad thing, but I think it allows you to have distinct decks. Oh, this isn't just another commander. This is one that clearly has a purpose and a goal that it's trying to achieve, and I think it's really fun to play when you can just like switch around all your equipment. Yeah. We have Omnath Locus of the Royal, which allows you to turn your basically lands and elementals into just damage, which is very cool. It also allows you to, in the late game, if you keep drawing lands, get past those lands to draw the spells you really need, and I think it works really well. It's also very powerful. We have Prime Speaker Vannifar. I think it's very fun to be able to just search your library, you know, oh, I want this piece, I want that piece, I want this piece, and, you know, get whatever you need going, and then you're able to just go off and just win. It allows you to essentially just slowly ramp up your board, even if you're not drawing anything, and I think it's very fun. Again, Gargos, I think, is very fun. It may not be that powerful, but it's fun. We have Alayla, who provides you with, like, flying tribal with added black, and it also provides you with artifacts and enchantment tribal, so there's lots of different things you can do with this card. We have Obosh, who I think has the most powerful static ability on paper when you just look at him, and I think it's very interesting that you might want to use this as a commander so you can run some 2-drops that maybe don't deal damage, but then your things that actually do damage are going to get doubled with Obosh, so very interesting. And then we have Godzilla, which is just a new type of effect. This might end up dropping on my list, but for right now, it seems pretty interesting. We have Ilhard, which allows you to kind of just cheat things into play and then bounce them back. So if they have good enter the battlefield abilities, or if they're just really big creatures that are normally expensive, this card is very awesome. We have Kroxa, which allows you to then, again, dodge commander attacks by using its escape cost. It then does some pretty cool stuff. It fits perfectly in the Rakdos theme because it'll sacrifice itself. I think this is one of the better Rakdos commanders. I think Judith might be better for Rakdos, but I think Kroxa is better overall. Nethroi, Apex of Death. This one just allows you to basically return a ton of stuff from your graveyard to the battlefield. I think this is the best form of when you mutate, do this. Fortunately, it's not in my favorite colors. I would have preferred blue to be somewhere in there. But overall, I like the card. We have Riel the Everwise, which can be do some really crazy stuff if you throw in, like, make an Is It Phoenix deck and Is It Drake's deck, a cycling deck. Those all fit within Riel's, like, belt of things she can do, because she's going to help you just draw a ton of cards and give a lot of things in your graveyard to help boost her power. We have, now we're moving on to the A. So those were like the B. Those are all the average ones. Like, I would build those decks. These are the decks that I would love to build. So Torbrand, very typical mono red, very powerful, fast deck that can be fun to just, like, smash face with. We have Firesong and Sunspeaker, which is the Brawlers Guild Hall thing. And actually, I just want to show you all of these. Rise the Redeemed, Talrin the Sky Summoner, the Gitrog Monster, and Bladewing. These are all like MTG Arena Brawl only. And they all have very clear things. Bladewing wants to wants you to build Dragon Tribal. This wants you to do land. This cares about instants and sorceries. This cares about tokens. This cares about red and white instants and sorceries. So it clearly, each of them has, like, a theme they're trying to get you to go towards, and they work pretty well for those themes, and they're fun to build around. We have Tolzamir, who's a very fun Wolf Tribal deck. Siona, these are just really fun, and they can be very powerful. Perforos is very powerful. Being limited to just red kind of weakens it, but I just really enjoy the deck. Corvold is a very powerful deck. It probably would be an S tier, but I've just seen it too much, and so it's really boring to play. But because of its power, I feel like I have to rank it a little higher than I would based on just a fun scale. Then we have Niv Mizzet Baroon, who I really enjoy just being able to cast things and cast more things that cast more things, and all the while you're just pinging everything. So it's a very, very fun archetype, at least for me, to play. And then we have Yarg the Desecrated, very clear what you want to do. You can enter the battlefield, gain control of 2 permanents, enter the battlefield, draw 2 cards. Just very clear what you want to do. It has both the Elementals Tribal and the ETB Tribal in there, so it works very well. We have Kinnan, Bonder's Prodigy, who's just a powerhouse that just lets you just ramp to infinity, and then just use that mana to just throw things onto the battlefield. So, very crazy. We have Emery, Lurker of the Lock. It's a artifact tribal. This one is one that I personally really like, because when it enters the battlefield, you're milling yourself. If you build your deck right, you probably never have to pay for commander tax, because you're at least putting 2 artifacts in the graveyard, and then that's going to make her 2 cheaper. So you can just keep playing her, then she lets you actually play things from the graveyard if you're like, oh, I actually want that. So it's very cool. We have Athreos Shroud Veiled, which allows you to save your creatures or steal other opponents. It's very versatile. Now, you only get to do things once per turn, which I said was a bad thing for, like, Colossus, and it is kind of a bad thing, but at least this is a lot more interesting. We have Teysa Karlov, who's going to double those death triggers, which just is utterly insane. If she had red in there, she would be broken, like completely broken. We have Heliod, who I think is the best mono-white commander, probably. It's so powerful to be able to, on turn 3, turn all your creatures into a Johnny's Pridemates. You can turn your Lifelinkers into a Johnny's Pridemate. You can turn your things with Hexproof into a Johnny's Pridemate, basically. And then you can also take your big creatures and make them Lifelinkers. You can turn your Lifelinkers into a Johnny's Pridemate and your Johnny's Pridemates into Lifelinkers. It's crazy. We have Winota, who I think should probably be higher on this list if you're looking at it from just pure power, but I'm kind of getting sick of the deck already. Yeah, insane. Yeah, but better with blue, but still insane. Now let's move into S tier. These are like the fun and really powerful decks. We have Feather, who just can go in there and just win really fast by just casting all sorts of spells over and over and over again. I find it to be very fun. We have Kenrith the Returned King, who can just fit in any deck, which is why he's here. You could build a Kenrith counters deck, a Kenrith life gain deck, just a Kenrith dump deck, a Kenrith human deck. I don't know, you could play this with anything because it is all 5 colors, but you don't have to play all 5 colors, so very cool. We have Tulane, who's very generically generic, but he lets you, again, similar to Kenrith, just kind of play in a lot of different decks. We have Niv Mizzet Reborn, which just has this ultimate ETB, that because you're playing all colors, you can probably just like flicker him or bounce him back to hand, or bounce him back to hand with board wipe and flicker him, you know, do all sorts of craziness to then just constantly refill your hand with all the cool stuff. I don't know if Niv Mizzet himself is the cool part, but just the deck that it goes in is very cool. We have Thassa Deep Dwelling, which is a very fun card. Now, I don't know if, you know, this is a fun card to play because it lets you just flicker things, and Mono Blue probably has enough support to keep this going, like, even beyond, you know, the next sets. Just, staying at this big, like, I just really enjoy Thassadex, even being monocolored is what I'm trying to say. And then Uro is our last card on this list. He's just so good. You can dodge commander attacks, he ramps you, he gains you life, he draws you cards, he's a big creature, and he's coming out early. So he is very, very just powerful as a card. Being able to access him every single game is just insane. So that's it for this video. I know it's been a very long video. I'm actually going to be doing another one of these where I break down all of the Planeswalkers, because Planeswalkers would be your commander in Brawl. Let me know what you thought of this in the comments down below. Let me know what you would have changed and what your like top 10 or your top 5 favorite Brawl commanders are. If you enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.